Guess you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Hi, good morning, folks. Welcome, or good afternoon. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Today, we're going to go over a little bit of an update for some of the forecasts to see where we stand, how things are going. We are now at September 28th, right? Things will move fast and furious moving into November here. And we'll talk about what we got, what is the plan here moving forward with the work that we're going to do. But first,
and so many of you know so much about this as well, and you're committed. And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here to help make this.
That would be heaven, Joe. Jackie couldn't be there today because she is in heaven. Jackie Leworski passed away in a car accident months ago. Joe, you gotta make you a little bit nervous when the president of the United States doesn't seem to know things like that, yet openly blurts out things like this.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Folks, you better hope. All of you better hope that we didn't do this. I just have to say that. These things always take time, or they usually do. But that is not the look you want either before a midterm. Conflict, bad economic data, all obviously go against an incumbent party. Unless, of course, it's at the beginning of a conflict, which it is not. The war in Ukraine, or whatever you want to call it, this proxy war that the U.S. has decided to wage against Russia and Ukraine, they are losing. And if they pulled a stunt like this to escalate involvement at this point in the game, it's not going to go over well with the American public. I'll tell you right now, it is not popular. This conflict in Ukraine, despite the amount of yellow and blue flags you may see on Twitter in people's handles, it is not popular with the American public and never has been. As we showed you with our polling at the time, even in the beginning, the concept of using anything beyond humanitarian aid, which was also not widely supported because people were more concerned about inflation than filling budget gaps in the war machine in Ukraine. They just didn't care about that. So plus 6s and 8s, which is what we found, support plus 8 when it came to humanitarian assistance. That is not viable public support for an operation like this. And if they did something to this pipeline, I hope, look, forget about the impact on the election. I hope for the country's sake they didn't do this. The adults are in the room. Okay. Let's take a look at the forecast here. Something significant has happened today. Okay. And let's go ahead and refresh it. All right. Just to make sure that that everything's on and good to go. You don't want to see me. Who the hell wants to see me? Right. Let's take a look at the most recent, and I will be updating this all throughout, obviously, the election cycle. Something interesting has happened here. Republicans have taken a lead on the generic ballot. I am a little bit surprised. The Economy and YouGov, which along with the one right below that, Politico and Morning Consult, all right, usually does not in modern, well, I wouldn't say modern, in recent, it's more accurate to say, in recent election cycles from 18 and on, The Economist and YouGov, along with some of the others that are sourced by YouGov, Politico, Morning Consult, I have a whole list of them here. A lot of them have started to play this game where after Labor Day, they just, they didn't switch at all to likely voter moving into 18 and 2020. Some of them may have switched at the very end, but at this point, right before October, they were still registered voter. It's something I've been very critical of now for several cycles. The Economist and YouGov did move to likely voter. Let's see. When was... Look over another laptop here. There it is. Hold on. In The Economist YouGov in 2018 was still a 1,233 registered voter sample as of October 23rd. That's just outrageous to me. There are a couple of misnomers we're going to go over that I've been hearing widely that we're going to flatly debunk. All right, one of them I might as well just do right now before we get into the lead on the generic ballot and where we're going. Because it was very clear, if you remember the last episode, and even if you watched What Are the Odds last night, we went over the last RCP average, and we're using RCP for a number of reasons. One, they absolutely are the least biased. All right, everyone has a bias. The difference between us and most others is that we do not hide that bias. Everyone has their own political views. All that should matter to you is whether or not they are offering sound election analysis, whatever it may be. If it's economics, elections, sound analysis that is supported by the data, and do not let people try to persuade you into thinking that they're either nonpartisan or just objective altogether. The first step of guarding against your own biases is to recognize that you have them and try not to hide them. All right, that's where you can put safeguards in place, and you can just double, triple, and quadruple check yourself to make sure that you're not allowing that to seep into your what is supposed to be objective analysis. All right, my point is RCP, I believe, is the most credible. The others are, playing games like I'm unskewing the polls and putting my own thing in there. I'm factoring for pollster scorecards that happen to be impacted by the amount of money my organization receives from said organization, right? So that is not legitimate. And the fact is they have had a much longer track record. They are the inventor of the average, all right, of aggregate polling. So we will stick with them. There's a couple of criticisms I've seen on them that I really need to bring up. One flatly was before this changed, you now see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7 polls in the average are likely voter polls. I was very critical because you could clearly see it when 5 and 7 of the average were registered voter polls. Democrats took that lead in the period you see in the graph below the table. All right. At this point, post-Labor Day, this idea that, well, we don't know who the likely voters are, so you should be using a registered voter sample even now, that flies in the face of all of history of polling. I don't know what they're talking about. Gallup is the gold standard. It was the gold standard. What pollsters, before they quit the horse race business, they were the gold standard, and media and diverse polls essentially tried to mimic them in their methodology, in their timing, everything. And Gallup is where it comes from, that you change from a registered voter to a likely voter model at the turn of Labor Day. The idea that you can't possibly figure out who is going to vote, folks, that's nuts. We have historical turnout data to look at. We have polling data itself that any good poll has a likely voter screen. We're one of the ones that would argue you should always include a likely voter screen in that last final year at least, because it's kind of like trying to dip your toe into the water late in the game, and to see what temperature it is, right before you jump in to the pool, and you haven't really prepared yourself. So now you realized, oh man, the pool's a little bit cold, and yet I still have to jump in. You could have dipped your toe in the water earlier in the day, and then you would know what to expect. All right, and try to make that analogy, draw that kind of distinction, because any likely voter screen is going to have, of course, a few questions in there that are going to be able to give you an idea of who is going to turn out and who has not. And it should not be a surprise. At this point, after a year worth of polling, it should not be a surprise that Republicans are going to do better on the likely voter model than they were on the registered voter model. For a year, Republicans have been, in by and large, one, more enthusiastic, which is debatable whether or not you want to include that in your likely voter model. But two, and more importantly than anything, they are more likely to say they are certain to vote. And guess what? They have the vote history to back it up. So it's a little bit different. Some people say, I only included those who are very likely to vote or certain to vote. I only included those like Emerson who are highly likely voters, right? Or they say they're highly like, whatever it may be. Others, like us, also include vote history. So there will be some people who say, you know what, it's unlikely I'm going to vote. But I know I'm talking to Doris, who is 82 years old. And Doris has a vote history going back to when she turned 18. Doris always votes in these elections. So despite her saying I'm unlikely to vote, I know Doris is going to vote, right? So this is all debatable, and everyone has their own proprietary likely voter model. Sometimes they'll just outwardly say exactly what goes into it. Sometimes, like us, we'll give you an idea of what goes into it, but I'm not going to give you the whole, every ingredient to the secret sauce. All right. We do look at some enthusiasm. Enthusiasm doesn't impact our likely voter model as it does others, for a very simple reason. If you went over it if you watched What Are the Odds last night, I explained to you why Barnes and I are always so big on looking at that extremely enthusiastic number. Because in the Arizona poll, which, by the way, we're going to do again, 97.4% of those who chose extremely enthusiastic to vote were also chose, I am certain to vote. All right. If you just fall to very, or you look at the next choice, which is very, the percentage of those who say they're certain to vote falls dramatically once you get out of extremely enthusiastic, all the way down to moderately enthusiastic, which about only a little over 50% said that they were certain to vote if they were also moderately enthusiastic. So I don't include that 100%. I don't, include that like others do. I'm going to screen you out based on that alone, simply because I feel like if you do other things right, you're going to get numbers like that anyway. And your certainty to vote is going to overwhelmingly be it's going to be the lion's share of those who are in your sample. And while you'll still have maybe 20% who said they were very likely, or 15% who were very likely, you may have 2 to 5% who said they were unlikely, but they're still going to vote. The lion's share, 75% roughly, let's call it 70 to 80%, are going to be certain in your sample to vote. And that will make up your likely voter. We have known from a year's worth of data that Republicans have been extremely enthusiastic and much more certain to vote than other Democratic groups. And by the way, that is true after the Dobbs decision, which I think is what really set a lot of left-wing so-called analysts into a panic attack over when they saw the ABC News Washington Post poll. Because the WAPO poll, which is a famous poll for they're infamous at this point, for their Biden plus 17 in the state of Wisconsin, where Biden won 0.2% by 0.2 of a percentage point. At this point, you missed that bad. It's an egregious error. It's almost unforgivable. It's basically unforgivable. And you're going to be known as that guy forever. Far worse than the Rasmussen era that was in 2018. It was an era. Far worse than Rasmussen's era that showed Republicans were up one on their generic ballot compared to everybody else when Democrats won it by about 8 points. And this idea that there's some kind of built-in bias for likely voters. That is simply not true. Likely voters tend to benefit Republicans a little bit more, although that is not the case every year. And Republicans should not expect that to be the case every year. It just was clearly the case this year, as it has been in many, many others, more often than not. It's just not always going to happen. It's a general rule of thumb, but it is not 100% certain to happen all the time. Why are likely voters more Republican this year and in other years? It's a matter of who actually comes out to vote. They tend to be more white. That can be balanced by being more educated. I'm saying that there are going to be more pre-high secondaries in a presidential election than there are going to be in a midterm election. There are going to be a disproportionate number of, 4-year degrees in a midterm election than there is. So there are some things that benefit Democrats, but because it also has to do with race and gender, men are more likely to vote in a midterm than women are. That's why our Wisconsin poll is 51% male, which we took heat over. I don't know how you poll Wisconsin right now and your split is 47-53. Men are or significantly more enthusiastic to say they're going to vote than women are. And based on the likely voter model right now, you could be a little bit shy of 2018. You could be a little bit more as far as turnout goes than 2018, but it's generally in that ballpark of 2018. And we know that Republicans are more certain to vote. It could be an even electorate at the end of the day. It could be, but it is no surprise. So it's incorrect to say that there's a bias toward Republicans with likely voters. That's not true. There's only a bias if it's incorrect. What we do know to be true is that in many years there has been there's a pro-democratic bias in registered voter samples. In most years, not all, but in most. And in most years, even as of recently, in 3 of the last 4 election cycles, there was actually a bit likely voter polls as well on understated Republican support. It depends if you're talking about nationally or statewide, but in total, even when some of these people moved to likely voters, they still understated Republican support. So again, it is incorrect to say there is a built-in bias with likely voters. It is also incorrect for them to criticize local politics for including the likely voter sample as opposed to if a pollster gives both, including the registered voter cycle. Everyone at this point, in a perfect world, would be releasing likely voter samples. Political consult, understand something. They are basically passing the ball. They are telling you, I don't want to do the other point of my job. So I'm going to give you a more Democrat-friendly registered voter sample because I don't want to try to predict the electorate. If a pollster was to give people, aggregators both, then Real Clear Politics is 100% correct here to take the likely voter sample instead. I don't know if people are getting like talking points, but I hear something that's wrong, and then I notice within 24 to 48 hours, everyone's using it. Everyone's saying, as if like a bulletin went out or something. It is incorrect. And the history of it goes back to Gallup. By Labor Day, they switched to the likely voter. University and media pollsters followed suit because Gallup was the gold standard, and that is where the industry stood for years. This new thing, NBC and others, this new thing of them doing this is fairly new. Again, I just said it's a new thing. NBC announced in 2020 they would not even go to a likely voter sample. And they may not do it there either. That is a cop-out. At this point, what are we? We're a few days away from October, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody should be also releasing. You want to release the registered voter? That's fine. And that could be a way for you to hedge what you're doing. Like, look, I generally had the registered voter electorate preference. I had that gauged accurately. I went a little bit awry with my likely vote model, but you can see that I was ballparking the area, and that, you know what, people should take that into consideration when they decide how badly a pollster missed or how accurate they were. Which is why we have been doing that for a while now. But to say that the registered voter sample should be, taken over the likely at this point in the cycle is simply incorrect. It is a pollster's job not only to predict how groups are going to vote, otherwise known as vote preference, but also who is going to vote. And it goes back to an old saying. You'd ask any political strategist. Ed used to be really funny with this. He'd go on Fox, Ed Rollinson. What do you think, Ed? What's going to happen? And he'd say, I think if you tell me who's going to vote, I'll tell you who's going to win. And he'd laugh and joke, but that's the old adage because, that's the what? Not even $64,000. That is the $1 million question. Who is going to vote? In Virginia, we did this in 2021. The very first poll we did for CD Media, the CD Media Big Data poll in the Old Dominion. It was tied at 47 in the registered voter sample, if you guys remember, but it was yunking by 2 in the likely voter sample. Why? Because we were projecting who was actually going to vote. And it was a rather high turnout for an off-cycle year special election like New Jersey and Virginia and others do it. Louisiana is another one. It was 4+ million voters. So the difference between our registered voter and our likely voter wasn't really that significant. We just knew 2 things. One, the electorate was going to be more conservative than it has been in a decade almost. And it was. And 2, that Republicans were about to at least vote on parity with Democrats. Part of that was because they were more enthusiastic and more certain to vote. The other part was simply that a lot of independents who may have said that they were Democrats to exit pollsters in 2020 were now either independents again or Republicans, self-identifying as Republicans. In Virginia, we have no other choice but to infer what they are by party because they don't have registration by party. We put out the machine learning models sourced by Aristotle and the National Voter File Database, and it clearly showed you a big in party identification. That's not at all to say what the vote share is going to be for a given candidate or a given party, but it was telling you that before 2020, Democrats had an edge in inference, identification. But by 2021, that was gone. And it was actually leaning just under R+1. Locals, so you remember this. This is more important. What I'm discussing right now is actually more important to that average you see on the screen right now than it is when a pollster just is simply polling and trying to determine how groups of registered voters are going to vote. That is where you get the registered voter. And of course, there's still waiting involved. You're going to wait. Everybody's different by age, race, gender, if you're us, gender and ethnicity, region, education, maybe. You throw in education, which Marist does not. When you look at the NPR Marist poll and you see a big difference between a 10-point difference between Kerry Lake and Blake Masters, that is because of education. Yes, incumbency is going to play some factor there, although I'm with Robert. I don't think that Kelly has this strong incumbency variable attached to him. He's got it, but it's not as strong as a 3-term incumbent like Bill Nelson, who also lost. The PVI of the state, the economic indicators, the voter registration trends overwhelmed incumbency in Florida in 2018. It's a very similar situation, only the incumbency factor is less for Mark Kelly than it is for Bill Nelson. That I strongly suspect, and we'll be figuring this out over the weekend because we're going to be polling Arizona again. I strongly suspect that that has to do with education. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that Blake Masters is running significantly behind Kerry Lake. I think he is running behind Kerry Lake. I'm just not sure if it's significant like that. In the poll we did, it was about 4 points. Very similar to Trump versus McSally. If you don't wait for education, if you need to, the goal, of course, always is to not impose a heavy weight fingerprint. But if you have to wait for education because you got like 20% post-grad, then guess what? Kerry Lake does better with educated groups, which I know is mind-blowing to some people. She does better among educated voters than Blake Masters does. So if the electorate is heavily working class, there's going to be a huge poll miss. And Arizona's not that educated. But these are the people who are constantly super willing, the first to jump up and want to take a survey. If you're NPR Marist, you speak to 400 people, you think you got enough, 400, 500 people, you think you got enough, you're done. All right. And I did want to kind of take a look at Arizona governor a little bit, but the fact of the matter is, real quick before we come back to this, the fact of the matter is, I'll take a look at it when we release the polls. I will just say this: if for Hobbs, her range of support is between 0 and, or I would say her lead range is between 0 and 1. That's it. Whereas Kerry Lake's is between 1 and 4. That should tell you quite a bit if the polls are accurate, which you have to be, you can't assume that to be the case. But that's something that, needs to be taken into consideration that we do in our own polling when we track it over time. For instance, in Georgia, we've had Warnock and Walker bouncing back and forth, but Walker's ranged between 42 to 47, where Warnock has only ranged between 40 and 43 or 44. So it tells us that Walker has a much higher ceiling depending on the electorate, and that seat is, a bunch of other things, of course, but that it's leaning to Walker. All right. Let me just bring this up real quick before we're coming up on 12:30 and before my spiel. I do want to say this. Of course, my ties to Florida. Of course, I want to try to do some quick service if I can. Great resource, Tropical Tidbits. They may look familiar to you. We used to use them on People's Pundit Daily for our weather section and our forecasts. Brilliant dude. Created a lot of this stuff himself. Look, when you can combine things like coding and your knowledge of meteorology, and he is, believe me, meteorologist as opposed to a weatherman. This is the Euro model. As somebody who's gone through this over and over, I just hope people are prepared, and I wanted to show this just in case you have family in the area or anything like that. Let's go up a little bit longer here. Let's go a little bit. Yeah. All right. So, let's go back. Sorry. Let's go back a little bit and run this puppy and show you where exactly this looks to be going over the next 72 to 90 hours. It has turned slightly east in the Euro model. So as opposed to just simply Gainesville and north, it looks like it is going to be Gainesville, Ocala, Tampa area where it's coming ashore. Look, guys, officials should not have to tell you to get the hell off the beach if you don't see the water. That is storm surge. That's what a storm surge is. I mean, it's a little bit crazy to me that I know there are snowbirds and I know there are a lot of new people from the Northeast trying to flee the ridiculousness of blue state America. I get you. I know you. You're my neighbors. You are my neighbors. Just you have to be a little bit smarter. The water's gone. It means it's a surge. All right. Thoughts, prayers with everybody. I hope you are absolutely thoroughly prepared. All right. Let's get back and we'll take a look. We'll look at if something changes significantly. I will take another look at that model before we go because I know there are a lot of people who have an interest in it. But for now, let's go back to where we are, which will be updated constantly throughout the next month or so, a little bit over a month. All right, so it is significant. At this point, Republicans have taken the lead on the generic ballot, And I forgot to change the damn date. It says September 27th. That is not true. On September 27th, Democrats had a 0.5 to 0.8, it depends on what time of the day you were looking at, lead on the generic ballot. The question now becomes, look, that Economist YouGov poll is a shift of 5 points to Republicans. 5 points. So you got to kind of wonder what the generic ballot for Rasmussen's going to be. Where is that going to go? And by the way, for those who were talking about the miss in 2018, their miss, I did write an article on it. You can. What's amazing is that they, are willing to admit when perhaps they're doing something wrong. They actually published that article with me criticizing how they ask the generic ballot question, which could have led to their confusion in a split decision first term incumbent midterm. What do I mean by split decision? The House went for the Democrats, but the Senate Republicans picked up 2 seats. If you don't ask specifically about congressional district or the House of Representatives, then I know it sounds crazy, but it is a bit of a commentary on our electorate. If you don't specify that you are talking about the House of Representatives, there is absolutely a risk that people will tell you how they're going to vote for the Senate if you simply say Congress. People in Indiana might have thought, I'm going to vote Donnelly out in Congress, but Donnelly was a senator. Now, they opted not to change the wording of the question. We'll see if that gives them problems in the future. The Senate is a pure toss-up right now, although we do have it going to Republicans. That is still very close to a toss-up. And, at this point, I just wanted to make that clear that wording matters. And we do see Republicans very clearly, as we shifted to a likely voter model, expectedly are doing better. Now, the question is whether it's a +1 like The Economist or YouGov, or it's ABC News Washington Post +5. We're just going to have to wait and see. Now, from our own polling, which is, did I put our generic ballot in here? I don't know why. If I didn't, I should have. Here's, just bear with me as I go through this. All right, we'll go back to that. Put Biden's approval, right track, wrong track, voter registration trends. Oh my God, Laura, I have got to put that in there. What was I thinking? Actually, no, let's go forward. Let's go to the Senate because we're coming up on 12:33. But I do want to take a look before we get to the Senate. I do want to take a look at our generic ballot, and I should have generic. Bear with me, guys. Because I want to point out that we in fact did find a tightening on the generic ballot in our pre-Labor Day poll, okay? Which means it was right up until Labor Day weekend, not post-Labor Day, which we are trying to do right now. And the link is in the description. You can share it far and wide, contribute to it if you can. We'd very much appreciate it. In a perfect world, we'd be able to get 2 more generic ballots from the Public Polling Project before the election. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. I just am trying to look out for the reputation in the Public Polling Project. They always judge you on those last ones. It doesn't matter if it was a month or 2 before. They always judge you on those last ones. So I'd like to get one now to kind of see post-Labor Day. That's why I wanted that baseline so bad, you remember? And I would like to get one now and then a final one before voters cast their ballots, where we can actually ask, did you vote already? Did you vote by mail? Okay, great. Who did you vote for? Do you plan on voting on Election Day? And we're going to start adding this to every poll. Certain to vote, or in some places, already voted. Okay, did you vote already? How did you vote? In person? Early in person? Did you vote through mail? If you plan to vote through mail, are you going to mail your ballot in, or are you going to drop it off? We have to do all of this. It matters. So by the final, generic ballot we have, we'll actually be looking at it in that kind of granular detail. And even in the Arizona poll we're going to do now, ballots go out very soon. So it's going to be, do you intend? What is your vote intention? Just like 2020. That's how we knew that it didn't matter that the absentee ballot advantage that was traditionally enjoyed by Republicans in the state of Florida Wasn't there in 2020. It didn't matter. Republicans were telling us they were going to vote in person early as they get closer to election day and also on election day. And that's why we saw Miami-Dade do what it did. All right. Well, that, and of course, shifts among ethnic voting preference, but you get the picture. All right. So let's take real quick before I got to do our first break here. This is the generic public project, and we'd have more. So share them far and wide. Contribute if you can. All right. And I did, like we talked about, I had to raise the cost of the public polling project, but I did not go as high as the number suggested I needed to go. All right. Because I just didn't want to hit that kind of an increase all at once. We'll gradually do this as we need to, and hopefully we'll find some people who are generous enough to do this. The bigger we build our contribution base, the less burden it's going to be on the people who currently and have been contributing to it. That's why I always say, if you can't contribute, that's fine. Share it far and wide. Because, look, guys, I mean, of course, it's great to have people who do large contributions, of course. But it would be, I would rather have 1,000 new donors at $5 a piece that I know are going to return and give $5. It would be, it's more sustainable, I guess is my point. All right, so here it is. All right, and you can see it did tighten. I actually even told you to expect it to tighten. This was a month ago, and we were at 42.5 Republican to 41.2 Democrat. And, it didn't really surprise me all that much. We have these summer tightens that happen a lot in polling. There is, regardless of what you hear from people, there is a summer response bias that hurts Republicans. And on top of that, I strongly suspect we're dealing with a social bias. I don't strongly suspect it. I know it because of the social desirability bias indicators we have. All right. I know, Laura, getting there. But it is much more likely that you will see it return to the mean leads that we had seen before than for it to tighten and stay this tight. It could. By all accounts, it could. It's technically possible. It's just not the historical norm. The norm, 3 to 5 points. Republican advantage. That's the norm. But we'll see. So, yeah, share far and wide. Appreciate those who have contributed. And let's get this puppy rolling. Let's try. Laura's going to kill me. I'm like, at this point, I feel like I have no choice. She's like, shut up. Yeah, I know. But I'm like, Laura and I, when we were talking about what we could potentially spend money on, Ohio was just not it. And she's like, no, because this is not cheap. Even when, we have public polling project help, it's still not what it normally is. And a lot of times, more than not, we just eat it. But with something like Ohio and Georgia, like we polled before for locals, that's something we're just doing. And when we're thinking about what else we could spend money on, Ohio is not one of them because it just was not close. And I'm going to show you this in a little bit. It doesn't matter. Fox had Biden +5 in August or September. Then they moved to a Biden +3. Then they went to Trump +3. And with people are Democrats today nationally, and who I have sung her praises, and Seltzer as a good pollster, a solid pollster in past. In 2020, very disappointing, and I'll get into that. But she's got this, she's like amassing this history of large swings in the month of September to October. And we went over this in 2020. The truth is, Iowa was never close. So when she was releasing ties to even slight advantages for Biden, it was Trump +8 to 10. The same thing was true of Ohio. It just was never close. So when Laura and I were discussing this, what about the Vance-Ryan race? We know we're going to see BS polls in the Vance-Ryan race. We're one of the only ones who can poll it correctly. What do we think about that? We just kind of, put it on the block. No, Vance is going to win. No. But we keep seeing these repeat offenders. They did it in 2020. They did it in 2018. They did it in 2016. Suffolk, who was the one who came out most recently, giving Ryan a 2-point lead, their track record in Ohio is horrible. It's a 9-point, or a Siena, excuse me. It's a 9-point miss last year in the state of Ohio. They are the ones who partnered with the New York Times, and together, them and Nate Cohen put out their final Biden +1 in the state of Ohio. Oh boy. It's over a 9-point miss. Slightly over. All right. So maybe we'll have to put together a note, because we did Nevada and we were able to fund that really quick with this public polling project. We may have to do this with Ohio, and I'll just, maybe I'll try to convince Laura to at least ease some of the burden here of it, and we'll eat it, because this is ridiculous, folks. I swear, if they force me out of their dishonesty to pull the state of Ohio and Vance has like a 6 to 8 point lead, I'm going to go. It may be worth it for you guys to fund that project just to watch me go ballistic. Right, Laura? Because if you haven't been following me this long and you don't remember my little video on Fox News and New York Times, Siena, releasing those pro-Biden numbers in Ohio the presidential election, boy, you missed some good content, because it just was not close. Barnes and I are looking at this. The Epoch Times, we pulled it for them as well. It was just so consistently clear. Iowa and Ohio were not competitive. And yet here we are. Biden +3. Quinnipiac, Biden +5. It may be worth doing it just for the content of me losing my you-know-what if Vance has a big lead, which I suspect he does. Because Spencer, he doesn't poll Ohio great. He doesn't. But at least he shows a reasonable idea of what's going on with the state. And even he has Vance up by 4. But you can't reconcile that with some of these other people who are giving, Ryan an above 2-point lead. That's just nuts. It's not. It's nuts. All right. Well, we're at it, though. Let's do this, all right? It's time for a word. Food shortages, folks. Look at what's going on with the hurricane in Florida right now. This is why Laura and I first got into this. 4 Patriots, we loved them. Look at whether you're in a hurricane zone or not. The economy, just talking about a global recession, and absolutely food shortages could be a problem in the U.S. Drought, inflation, and yes, even new policies are pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food kits. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years super survival food. Hand-packed right in the family-owned facility in the USA. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, and they stack very easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners. You can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP for the People's Pundit. 4patriots.com/TPP right there on your screen to get your 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and shipping. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com/TPP for the People's Pundit to build your own stockpile like Laura and I do today. And if you're surfing around their website, they have a lot of great stuff. I personally would tell you, if you can do it, get this 3-month survival kit, because it's chock filled with so many goodies and so many different varieties. If you can do it, do the 3-month, absolutely. But there are so many other great things on their website. If you're going to buy other stuff, promo code TPP10. TPP, obviously, for the People's Pundit, TPP10 for 10% off to get your, store-wide 10% off, site-wide discount. All right. Again, great stuff. Great stuff. All right. And by the way, like the 72-hour kits, you grab a 72-hour kit, TPP 10. All right. So let's see. Where do they donate for the public polling project? Okay, Laura's about to barge in here. You can go to, actually, I'll give you, it's in the link description, but I'll give it to you right now. Laura, I'm going to give it to them. Where was that? Getter? Locals? In Getter, I think they give me a hard time with the link. All right, I'm sending Laura the link right now so she can pass it along. On Getter, let me see if I can give it to you directly. Sometimes they don't like links that are too long. There it is. I just could do the link. I couldn't title what it is. But that's for the national poll, and I would rather do that than some states at this point. I really would. But, that's where we're at. Okay, and then you could always go to bigdatapoll.com and just scroll all the way down. After you see the rows of charts, which we have many more to put up, I have to do. After you see the rows of charts that show the trends, the historic trends for right track, wrong track, the generic ballot, party affiliation, the employment index, the registered voter economic confidence index. All right. After you do all that, you scroll below that and you'll see the form where it shows the wall for everybody who's donated, whether it's the national poll or it's Nevada, whatever it may be. There's a wall like almost like a GoFundMe kind of look. And we did it. We wanted our own native thing on our system. Thank you, Give WordPress, who designed it, the plugin designer. We wanted that because we just can't rely. Even I don't care. GoFundMe, Go Scratcher, right? I don't care who it is. I wanted it native and in total control of us, and I don't really need anybody else or third party taking money from you. All right, so that's where it is. And the only third party that does now, of course, is the payment processor. I did, by the way, just put in Played. All right, which you can actually use ACH now. It'll take a while for it to clear, but I know a lot of people, especially people who make larger contributions, they don't like to do it through PayPal or Stripe where they rip them off. You can use Played now. All right. All right. So let's get back to the forecast for the Senate and do a little bit of an update of where things are. All right. All right. Here's what's in play. Okay. We are now down to 7 seats. I agree with oops, you can't see. We are now down to 7. And Laura, can you hear me? What the hell did I do with my water? There it is. Hold on, guys. Oh, no, it's empty. Uh-oh. I'll have to get some water here. All right, but 7 seats now are in play, down from 8. Why? I really think Colorado's off the map. I know O'Day is close. I just don't really see it as a pure toss-up at this point. Or even a leans. All right, this is RCP. We're going to show you where I'm at in a second because we have made some adjustments. I'm here. I do think New Hampshire, and I'll show you our updated forecast here. I do think New Hampshire is a toss-up. I do think it does lean Democrat, but New Hampshire is a state that can dramatically shift. And we were just talking about likely voter modeling before. Thank you, love, I really appreciate that. If more native second, third generation voters in New Hampshire vote in a disproportionately high number than the new arrivals and stuff like that, you can absolutely see state shift considerably. In 16, it was very close. In 20, it really was not, right? We've seen this happen before. In 14, Jeanne Shaheen was able to hold on. We'll just have to see where it goes. But Baldock got a late start, and Republicans now are really starting to spend. And in fact, let me show you that. If you didn't watch What Are the Odds yesterday, I'm just going to impose it over here. All right, because I really want to continue to show you what I'm showing you. In every state but Arizona, Republicans from September 5th through the 26th indeed outspent Democrats, who had been dominating all through the summer, which by the way, does help for you to understand why Democrats had these leads in December. I mean, oh God, in December, in the summer. All right, while it looked so rosy for Republicans before, because the year leading up to the summer was defining the political environment. Largely the issues that people were going to care about are going to come back into play. But throughout the summer, Republicans got bludgeoned and held their fire, did nothing. Now, I am somebody, I do not advocate for that. I think that I am more in line with the spring defining your opponent strategy in the spring. George W. Bush is a great example of that against John Kerry. It was March and April when he was calling John Kerry a liberal from the Northeast, and it worked in Iowa, in Ohio, in Florida, right? Okay. In Florida now, this $6 million is almost a waste of friggin' money. I mean, Val Demings is not mounting a significant effort to topple Rubio. Guys, I just can't stress this enough. If you still leave the D+1 or anything polls in the state of Florida, like I saw the other day, you're smoking crack. Florida is significantly more Republican than it was even in 2020. Florida bucked the national trend in 2018 because its lean is still ongoing. The shift isn't over. As of 2 months ago, there are more registered Hispanics in Miami-Dade that are registered as Republicans than there are as Democrats. Marco Rubio is going to crush it there. In DeSoto, he's going to crush it. This is crazy. Florida is going to be R4 at least in the exit polls. Mark my words. In the Fox News voter analysis, it was R8 in 2020. I disagree. Our polling was right on money. I believe R4. I'd have to go back and look. Maybe R5. But nevertheless, you get my point. Unbelievable. D+1. It's just indefensible at this point, guys. It's just indefensible. But Nate Silver says it's an A-rated poll is just freaking old. I should have kept that tweet pinned. I had pinned it on election night. It was a big middle finger. I nailed Florida again, Nate, with a big... I should have kept that puppy pinned forever, but eventually I had to make way for a locals video. All right, but in Georgia, you can now see Republicans are really shelling it. Mitch McConnell had no choice but to do that. In Georgia, everyone expects it to flip. So for them not to come to Walker's aid would probably result in a tar and feathering. In Wisconsin, Ron Johnson had an ungodly amount of money thrown at him in the summer. He is now returning fire. So is the NRSC. Ron Johnson, of course, as you know, where do we have it? And as you know, Ron Johnson is now in the lead. And I do not believe he will. That's Donald Trump. What the hell am I doing here? Ron Johnson is in the lead, and I do not believe he will relinquish that lead to somebody named Mandela Barnes in the state of Wisconsin. Take that for what you will. All right, in Pennsylvania, Republicans are starting to spend money at the Senate level. They have abandoned Doug Mastriano altogether. Doug Ducey has abandoned Doug Mastriano. That was always the plan. Okay? Why? It's not only about Doug Mastriano. They do not want a Trump ally as the governor of Pennsylvania, regardless of what people tell you. It does matter who is governor of the state when they're counting votes. Everyone knows it. It is true. And they would rather Donald Trump lose again in 2024 than not have, they would absolutely rather see Donald Trump lose in 2024 than reclaim the White House. It's that simple. They would give to reclaim it under Donald Trump, I should say. So they are spending in the Senate as a way to save face, and they have abandoned Doug Mastriano, the RGA, who is led by the current governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey. In Arizona, Peter Thiel and others, and now Save America is coming in to spend on Blake Masters because the National Republican Senatorial Committee has basically abandoned Blake Masters. In North Carolina, again, they have no choice. Democrats raise money in North Carolina, so they have no choice but to spend nearly or over $10 million during this period in favor of Ted Budd, because if they were giving up on a race that is everyone believes is going to go to Ted Budd. Let's cut the crap with the fake forecasters, all right? You all talk behind the scenes and to each other, to myself, to others. You all know nobody is seriously entertaining the possibility that Sherry Beasley could beat Ted Budd. Let's cut the crap. In Nevada, Adam Laxalt, that's that race there. As we showed before, we do have Adam Laxalt ahead. We have him ahead pretty solidly, even though it's, that's the ballot. Damn it. I keep the wrong one. Sorry about this. We have Adam Laxalt ahead pretty modestly, even though it seems it's a solid lead, and so does everybody else. All right. So from Data to Progress, which is a leftist polling firm, all the way to Trafalgar, it's a Laxalt +1, a Laxalt +4. Us being at 2, Insider Advantage being at 3, Emerson being at 2, I believe. So the common consensus, Laxalt's ahead. In New Hampshire, Baldock, like I said, that system in New Hampshire is designed to protect incumbents. You can't, it's a late primary. You can't raise money toward the general election until the primary is done legally. All right. And you cannot run ads that are really general election targeted. It is handicapped towards preventing outsider candidates or challenging candidates from beating the incumbent. All right. So with this in mind, let's move forward. And I have to change the text. That's the RCP. We're going to mine. All right. So we did remove Colorado. Like I said, I just don't see it as being in play. Ohio, despite the polling, is lean to likely. Oops, something didn't update with the cache. Everything is right here except for Wisconsin. I don't know why that didn't update. Wisconsin is darker. It is now likely Republican. Okay. Pennsylvania, despite the polling, we are still leaning Republican at this point because of Joe Biden's historically horrible approval rating, and because, look, folks, there's been some serious problem with some of the polls I've seen released in Pennsylvania. One which shows Fetterman clinging to a 2-point lead. Actually asked voters whether they were registered to vote in Georgia. I am not kidding. I'm not going to embarrass this pollster, but I could not believe my eyes. The script for the interviewers and what was fed in for SMS and what was fed in for IVR, because it was a mixed mode survey, said Georgia. Are you registered to vote? And are you registered and eligible to vote in the state of Georgia? I kid you not. Why is that a problem? Rich, wouldn't they just ignore it? No. Some people would be like, well, this is a stupid ass poll, and hang up. It's true, Laura. You know it. It was a dumb mistake. And even still, I'm telling you right now, what I'm saying is that Oz's and Mastriano's voters were the most likely to hang up after hearing that. They're the most likely to drop off if they were doing it through text message or whatever after seeing that. The educated liberal is still going to take the poll. All right. Arizona is still leans Kelly. That may change after I poll it myself, because my own polling data, you damn right that our own polling data is a heavier weight variable in our forecasting than public polling. Yup. I learned that lesson in 2014. We had Tom Tillis winning that race by 1.5 points. Because of other public polling showing he had no chance, Kay Hagan leading in September between 7 and 10 points throughout the month of September. It tightened in the final 2 weeks of October but it never tightened to the point where everyone seriously thought Hagan had lost her lead. The same is true in 2020, by the way. The public polls have not polled some of these states correctly in very, very long time. It is not just about 2016. In North Carolina, the last time public polls correctly and accurately polled the state of North Carolina was 10 years ago in 2012. And even some of them understated Mitt Romney's support in the state of North Carolina. People thought Obama could probably hold on to that state. He did not. He lost that along with Indiana, 2 states that he had carried. And he damn near carried Missouri, by the way. All right. But as of right now, in our modeling, Blake McMaster's is still about they're about 1.5 points away from outside the sampling era, and that was you know what? If I would have reran it a week ago, then that probably would not be the case. But the Marist poll that just dropped, does in fact put Mark Kelly back outside of the average era for the state. Okay. So everything here, I mean, it's still a +2 Republican pickup situation. That's where we're at. I did lean New Hampshire until I see more. It is leaned Democrat because the voter, why is New Hampshire stubborn in our modeling? It's the voter registration variable. It's not just the polling. It's the voter registration variable. There is, coupled with partisan voting behavior or ancestral voting behavior, or really what's wrapped up in partisan voting behavior as a variable. But there have been people who have been moving and flooding the Manchester and surrounding area from Massachusetts. They are not working class people who are leaving Massachusetts for, a redder state or a purpler state, like we have seen in some other areas. Until we see some kind of indication, they're one of the few states where that is actually helping Democrats and not hurting them, as we have seen in Florida, as we have seen in Arizona. People think, oh, people are moving from California. That's why Arizona is a battleground now. That's not true. The people who are fleeing California to go to Arizona and Texas and other areas, they're actually Republicans, working class, Republican leaning at the least voters who are leaving because they can no longer afford the state of California. They are not bringing California politics with them. In New Hampshire, there's no evidence yet that that's the case. As Republicans make registration gains, because Democrats did widen their gains out a little bit, never more than about 3 points, but they did. As Republicans tighten that back up, and even sometimes exceed Democrats month to month, it changes. The swelling of the independent vote is still, which makes up the largest share out of any voting bloc in that state. The swelling of it, the renewed swelling that offsets the Republican gain, it's not conservative. So can they swing 1 year and really decimate Democratic candidates statewide? Yes, they can. And how I know, because of some of the down ballot vote preference we're seeing in some of these pollings. They're going to vote for a Republican legislature hands down. It looks like Congressional District 1 and 2 are gone. They're going Republican. But at the state level, which is always last to go, it's still very competitive, if not leaning Democrat. Now, it's possible that there's a big polling miss, and this will be the year. Let me put it this way: Senate and presidential vote preference lag legislative and gubernatorial vote preference at the for state government. The partisan trends lag state and local voting trends. All right, at the federal level. Eventually, they'll catch up. A great example is Virginia, whereas presidential and Senate preference moved to the left, it was still a Republican House of Burgess for a long time. Or excuse me, House of Delegates. I'm a history buff. Sorry. And and that chamber, held firm for a while for Republicans, but then they lost it. All right. In fact, they got wiped out. That now swung back, but that's besides the point. The House of Delegates swung back to Republicans, but that is beside, and so did the governorship. but the vote preference at the state level will lead. So you may need an election in New Hampshire right now this year. You may need to see Republicans just sweep state government before you see it move at the federal level. It is entirely possible I'm wrong because you have Sununu's popularity there. If he would have ran for Senate, he would have won the Senate seat easily. But he is doing everything he can to help Baldock. And at this point, it is unpredictable. However, you got to, because looking at the beneath the surface here, folks, you got to still give it to Maggie Hassan. Here is the X factor, though, with New Hampshire. She is not popular and really never has been. Jeanne Shaheen has established, whether it's fair or not, she has established herself as a moderate, and she has had approval ratings consistently positive, if not slightly above 50%. When you ask, do you believe Jeanne Shaheen deserves re-election? You'll get a yes. None of that is true with Maggie Hassan. She's underwater on the deserved re-election question right now. She is not popular or have a very high, she is not looked at favorably. Her approval rating is not positive, nor is it above 50%. That is an X factor. You got to leave it up to Baldock now to see how he sells himself. It's just that, and also too with New Hampshire, the system itself favors Hassan in that you give the eventual Republican nominee very little time to pivot to a general election, to raise money and make their case. You would expect them to be down anywhere between 5 and maybe 8 or 9 points coming out of that primary. But as we get into October now, if you start to see it tighten, Hassan could be in some real danger. Real danger. University of New Hampshire poll, look, they had Hillary Clinton winning that state by 13 points. We all know how that ended up. So if you see them tighten and start to move, then Hassan could be in trouble and we'll reevaluate it. Until we poll Arizona, this is where it stands. Again, I do want to say this with a caveat. If we would have retooled the model after the Emerson poll dropped, then probably it would have tinted red. Why? Because everything else is on the side of Blake Masters, who was not well known, was running against somebody who does have high name ID, has a huge war chest. So by October, you may see things move for Blake Masters, especially if the spending ramps up and at least gets parity. I would like, if I was the Masters campaign, I would like to see the combined amount actually exceed Kelly, who will start to run out of fire soon. And I want to know if the Rodrigo Hispanics are monkeys comment hurt Kelly, because he was even forced to issue an apology, which did run in Arizona Central and the Republic, both of which are not friendly Republican newspapers. One is owned by USA Today, and I believe the other one is owned by the New York Times. But even if it's an apology, people are still going to see it. What did he apologize for? Well, he apologized for calling Hispanics monkeys. He basically said his brother Rodrigo is, you know what? Let's play it. Hold on. Let's play it. Why am I? Give me a second. I'm gonna pull it. Okay, so let me move it over. Stop sharing here. Share on here. Give me a second. Let's play it. This is a kind of comment that would, look, if it was a Republican candidate, it would end their campaign. Now, I know. I don't want to hear it. We're dealing in the reality, not in the world we want. It's beyond a bias. The media handicap is actually part of the model and always has been. You guys can go. I wrote about that extensively on People's Pundit Daily. Why is something so weird like that in an election model? Because some of the information that has to deal with the model is only worth anything if it's seen by people. All right? For everything from candidate quality down to stuff like this. I mean, which is in candidate scandal is part of candidate equality. Fundraising is part of candidate equality. All right, but let's share it. And you should be able to hear the audio. I should have made sure that I had it, but all right, let's make it big and let's roll.
Sit. I think we're going to sit for the Q&A.
Oh, where the hell is it?
First question is, I need a microphone. All right.
Hold on.
Well, in 1969 when NEET
Oh God, what happened? It wasn't stopped at the. Does anybody know the time mark here? Somebody probably does. I didn't time mark it for people. Oh no. All right. Well, basically, he said maybe Laura can get it, and then when she gets it, we'll put it back up. How about that? All right. But what he basically said was, and it was like a family joke, but he said, my brother spent so much time in space that it literally altered his DNA. And he's basically acting all crazy for it. He's, gone back. He's regressed on the evolutionary time. It's altered DNA. And he's acting like an animal, he's somewhere between a monkey and an orangutan. And it's gotten so bad, we had to release him into the wild. And we changed his name to Rodrigo. If you don't think that's going to hurt with Hispanics in Maricopa and Pima County, you're nuts. That could possibly hurt him with white voters in Scottsdale. Yeah. I mean, that is something those suburban white women hear, and they know they're supposed to be virtuous, and they cringe over it. There is also some other stuff, that we'll just have to see. But there is some other stuff on Kelly. I don't know if it's going to gain traction, and I don't know if people are going to really even see it. So I'm going to leave that aside now. All right. You'll hear about it if it is double and triple confirmed and it comes out. It's about his family disposition. He wasn't the family man he's portrayed himself to be. All right, but I'm not going to get into that. It won't matter anyway if it doesn't have legs. So this, however, this could have hurt. And when we poll Arizona again, I'm curious to see whether or not it appears to. But all of the other indicators, all the other variables, I should say, you should use that word more often than indicators. All the other variables in Arizona, unlike New Hampshire, do favor Blake Masters, and that's the difference. So if they do fall within that average error, right, then it is more likely than not, given the rest of the predictive variables in Arizona. Registration, Biden, right? Biden's a big part of this. And I actually looked at it yesterday on what are the odds. I was wrong. 50% strong of undecideds in the Senate race. Last time we polled, 50% strongly disapproved of Joe Biden, and another roughly 20 somewhat percent some disapproved. So altogether, in total, more than 7 out of 10 of the voters who are undecided disapprove of the job Joe Biden is doing. Let me tell you, folks, if those voters vote for the Democratic candidate, it would be the first time ever. You can't find me another example where that happened. You can't. And they're making a little bit too much out of how much Joe Biden's approval rating has risen, because now we have the ABC Washington Post poll that shows not that much. And also, it is common to see a president's approval rating rise before their first term incumbent midterm. We saw it with Trump. We saw it with Obama. We saw it with Bill Clinton. And yet they still got routed. Okay? So, again, context, folks. Context. And just so you know, just so we compare this accurately here, right now, let's say he's at 42%. Okay? Let's give him 42%. Well, in Gallup, Trump was at 43, and he was higher in the RCP average. Obama was at 45. He ticked higher. Clinton was at 46. These are all midterms we saw pretty significant changes in the House, and in 2 out of 3 of them, significant gains for the out-of-power party in the Senate. The Senate is a little bit different, a lot of different than the House. I do view it, even though I'm giving net 2 to Republicans here, I still do view it, and we should go over this in more detail. The difference between, like this chart that I've shown you, hold on. I'm going to put it up right here. For the House, to explain to you historically how the House goes, I also am working on one for the Senate to show you that it isn't always the case in the Senate, but there are reasons for that. That's because the landscape matters more in the Senate. You have all of those districts, up for grabs in the House all the time, but not in the Senate, right? You have rotating 6-year tenure. So the map could look better for one party some years than others. Trump was Trump. He bucked the historic trend in the Senate, and he added 2 seats. You had to go back to JFK to be able to see a party do comparably well in a first-term incumbent midterm. But the map favored him. It favored Republicans. A lot of red states, graphs. Robert and I went over this last time. And honestly, it would have been worse for Democrats if they didn't have certain candidates who were uniquely tailored to those states. Joe Manchin, he lost it now. And if he was to run right now for re-election, he'd get creamed. But in 2018, it wasn't like that. He still had the moderate image. I'm Joe Manchin. I still like coal. I still that. Now Joe's voted against gun rights. He's voted against coal. He's done. His approval rating in the state is abysmal now. And that was not the case in 2018. John Tester, very moderate image. Whether it's true or not, I'm not here to debate. He had a moderate image, and he was generally well-liked even by a large chunk of Republicans. He was viewed as a conservative Democrat, looked like a military guy, Montana to the core, and he barely held on, but he held on. Joe Manchin held on quite comfortably, actually. I mean, not his usual margin, but quite comfortably. Tester barely held on against Matt Rosendale. It was 2 points. Rosendale is not a fantastic candidate. Can we be real? Steve Daines, he may have beaten John Tester if it was different cycles and we were talking about different candidates. In Indiana, Joe Donnelly, he was once upon a time viewed as this Midwest, and by the way, Evan Bayh also had polling leads going into his election, and he got crushed. Indiana is a horrible state when it comes to polling. Right, Fox News? Joe Donnelly +7. Go and look at the polls, folks. It's not like the polls showed that these states were going to go Republican. North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, and I polled that race for once publicly and once privately for a candidate. Nailed that one. Kramer +12 or 11 or something like that. But uniquely tailored candidates who still lost. Some held on, but some still lost because the states were the map was just too hard for Democrats to overcome. All right. That is not the case here. The states are up this year are not states overwhelmingly favorable to Democrats. That's the difference between this year and 2018 and this year and 1962, which isn't, it's kind of hard to say it's comparable because the truth is in 1962, we still had a lot of ticket splitting going on. We certainly do not have that now. In the era of Obama, we watched ticket splitting reduced to 90%. Unit ticket, I should say ticket splitting was reduced to 10% of contested contests. 90% were voting party line across the board. Then by 2016, it was basically 100%. All right. Let's go back to a word from our sponsors. All right. Look, we'll run over the model again one more time. I did see some changes. The storm surges, the forecast are now 18 feet. I always get so sick to my stomach when I see the media cheerlead for death and mayhem and destruction. Politico, CNN, people who either their outfits themselves tweeting things or people with blue checks who work for them. Disgusting. They are rooting for a disaster so they can criticize Ron DeSantis. These are disgusting people. I once saw somebody I know, a family member, who is a raging Democrat and a lunatic. I just tell you, not everybody's family is perfect. Is yours? A nutcase lunatic. I'm ashamed of the woman. Basically being used by CBS News in a report accusing Rick Scott of mishandling Irma so bad that the elderly that died in their community died because of Rick Scott, because the power went out and they needed air conditioning, or maybe there was a device that they didn't have a generator backup, and there was a device they needed to pump oxygen or whatever it may be. These people living in Florida, you will see the worst of the media, the worst, just rotten souls to the core. They want red tide to kill animals. They want hurricanes to kill people so they can then criticize political opponents. It's the most vomit-worthy crap you will ever see. It doesn't get much worse than that. Maybe accusing a president of colluding with a foreign enemy to steal an election, that's pretty bad. But human death, to cheerlead for human suffering and high death tolls so you can try to cut your political opponents down a peg, is gross. The good news for Republicans is that the voters don't fall for it. In fact, it backfired on them against when they did it to Rick Scott, because the voters, the people of Florida, saw Rick Scott at that moment for what he was. And I know, I remember, I was following him around. That was my job. I have never seen, as a public pollster, someone change their image the way Rick Scott changed his image, which allowed him later to win the Senate race against Bill Nelson, who was still well liked, even though he lost some of that moderate coat to him. I'm a moderate astronaut. Sound familiar? It backfired on the media, and Rick Scott's approval ratings went to the moon. His favorability ratings went from negative to positive. People saw whatever you could, and I know a lot of Republicans, especially MAGA, do criticize Rick Scott, but and there are things I'm very disappointed as watching him as governor to see how he's comported himself in the U.S. Senate. Nobody's perfect, damn sure. But what I saw and what the people of Florida saw was a guy who was like, oh yeah, that's why I went with this businessman, this executive. He just took the reins, man, and dealt with Irma. And for those who don't live through hurricanes, you don't know. Irma, they're always concerning, and you need to take them seriously. But Irma was bigger than anything that any of us had ever seen before. I'll never forget when they first showed me that on the satellite. I was like, oh my God. That storm is bigger than the state of Florida. It was huge. And by the way, because of preparation, we got a little bit lucky with nature, a lot of it lucky with nature, but that's why it didn't work on the voters with Rick Scott, because they saw the truth. What really was the truth. He prepped that state the best any leader could have prepped. And we weathered that storm together. And it would have been a hell of a lot worse if Rick Scott was not there. I'm serious. Laura, I don't know if you got a mic, you can back me up, but I looked at Rick Scott differently after that storm.
No, he did well. He did a great job, actually. And then also how the schools come together in Florida as shelters and food. And I mean...
And who started that? Who started that and giving them the supplies to do it? Because they always had those plans, but they really were not equipped to do it, Laura. That was always the problem. Who made it happen? Rick friggin' Scott made it happen. He did.
And then working for the school system, I mean, when I tell you, these storm shelters had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and real breakfast, real lunches, real dinners, not little prepackaged things. I'm talking about scrambled eggs, potatoes, Even Roman
Oh, it's
agrees with
delicious.
me.
And it was,
good
and
stuff.
and Laura, without even Roman, without them, making that work, making those preparations and really rewriting emergency response, it's like the media, they're supposed to be the champions of the the vulnerable. That is who those plans protected, right? It wasn't the people in Hale Plantation, Laura, who could sit behind their fortified, solid houses with generators hooked up. That's not who you sheltered at these places, correct? You
No,
sheltered the people who
no,
Democrats
they,
are supposed to care the most about.
yes. I mean, these were also, there were a lot of trailer homes. And so, nothing against trailer homes, but they are very light. And so they are
They
very
don't
dangerous
withstand
in a
it.
storm. So they easily come up if you have crazy mile-per-hour winds coming at you. And then there were also schools that had because, not all shelters are pet friendly. There were certain schools that were designated for pet friendly shelters as well. And
Yeah.
they kept them all in a secure area and whatnot. And all you had to do is bring your animals, what's it called? Not, I don't like to call it cage, but we used to call it our dog's house. But they're little carriers, and they would sit out the storm with the rest of them. It was pretty cool.
You should be proud of that work, Laura.
I sure was, and I will
You
always
should be proud of
talk
them.
about it.
Seriously, you did good stuff. My wife left her family during these storms to go be with those people. Understand what Floridians will do for each other. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But yeah, the media, you know what? You're gross. You're gross. You're trying to inject examples of the worst of humanity during a period where we should be celebrating the best of it. And it's like, again, I only get as rough as I do with some people, like, to see the Tampa authorities, have to do that, have to risk themselves because people are being so careless. It bothers me because I know how hard these people work. You remember GRU, how hard they worked afterwards to get things together after Irma. There was, multiple power companies, of course. There's really two big ones, especially if you're in Central Florida, Gainesville, around surrounding area. There's Clay, there's GRU, and there's Duke. But these people work their butts off. And then you have first responders who have to go out and try to help people who make these really stupid decisions. If you say, oh, the beach, look, the water's not there. It's not even that bad. Barely any waves. That's because it's a storm surge. It's pulling the water out, and it's about to throw it all back at you. Please use your head and don't put anybody else at risk. Speaking of which, be prepared for these storms and food shortages. We're in a recession, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. All right? It can happen. Drought, inflation, new policies from the government. They are all pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. Survival food is more important than ever. Do what we do. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. It's not ordinary food. We're talking about good for 25 years, super survival food that is hand-packed right in a family-owned facility in the USA. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, they stack easily. They have different, this is why this 3-month kit so awesome. Different delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners. You make these meals in less than 20 minutes, folks. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP to get your 3-month survival kit. You'll get their, like Laura and I, you'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and free shipping. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP for the People's Pundit. That's 4patriots.com/TPP to build your own stockpile like Laura and I do today. And if you're on their great website, browsing all of their wonderful products, if you want the People's Pundit tip, I'm going to give it to you right now. Grab yourself a 72-hour survival food kit if you want to try it out. In checkout, go to TPP10 discount code, enter TPP10 in the discount code to get 10% off whatever it is you buy outside that 3-month survival kit. But I'm telling you, do the 3-month survival kit. It's a world, and that shipping is awesome. Wait until you get it. For those of you who have gotten it, you know what I'm talking about. Let us light it up in the comments. Tell them it's a load of stuff. So the free shipping is a big deal because you'd be paying for it if you didn't have it, if they didn't offer it. All right. And plus, you get all out of it changes, but you'll get useful free gifts. This is the Freedom Flame. I keep it handy. This is at my desk. I keep it handy all the time. Get the Freedom Stove. People like, how you boil it, Rich? Just wait. They got everything you need if you find yourself in a situation like this. And it's not just weather. It's not just weather. This country is being... Look, it's objective. It's objective. I'm not giving my opinion here. The country is being mismanaged. The economy is in bad shape. Global economy, not good. Forecasted for a global recession just came out yesterday. And by the way, this is why that thing I played earlier today with Biden too is so important. They did something to this pipeline. Do you know how bad they're going to screw Europe and their economies, which is obviously going to hurt us? It's just unbelievably insane. But the good news is you can do stuff to protect your family today. All right. Speaking of which, we were just talking about economic indicators. Brief recap. And I do have to end a little bit. I got a thing I have to take care of. So I do have to end in a little bit here. But just let's do a brief recap here. And I will bring up governorships. I can answer if you want. I see numerous questions about governorships. If you ask about a specific state, I will absolutely give you that rating. The governorship map should be done by Friday. Okay. I've been waiting for a couple of things. I don't want to leave some states blank. All right. But I can give you a rating either way. Right now I got to go with my own polling. Tony Evers is in a lot of trouble. It's more than just the polling. Here's where we're talking about when it comes to these election forecasting and what is predicted. And I got to add candidate quality on here. But presidential approval ratings, right direction, wrong track. Economic indicators, we were just talking about. Voter registration trends, we don't have in a state like Wisconsin, for instance, but we do have primary vote shares. Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. You get voter analysis, modeling. You know how far to the right Wisconsin has shifted in 4 years, more than 4 years. Robert and I were talking last night on What Are the Odds. If you missed it, go check it out. It was a good time. Every Tuesday, 7:30, I would say, 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Tuesday is going to be What Are the Odds from now on. I'm glad we're able to make this work because Mondays it wasn't working. If it wasn't working for Robert, which he's very busy, it wasn't. And then on a day it did, it was like, oh, I can't do it now today, Robert. So I'm glad we were able to agree on Tuesdays. And we went over this last night. We remember doing videos years ago, folks, where those models for Wisconsin were easily D+3 to D+6. It happened all the time. All the time. And now, I remember showing the first one when it first tipped slightly Republican. I remember showing it to Sean Trendy from Real Clear Politics. I'm sure you guys know him. And it was really interesting, his take on it. And he had said, this doesn't really surprise me. I think the era of Walker and the right to work movement really did a lot of damage to Democrat, identification in the state of Wisconsin. He won those recalls. He won re-election, was able to pass those legislative agendas and reforms, and it weakened labor. I would say organized labor. It didn't weaken anybody's labor position. It's the birth of progressive labor movement is Wisconsin. But it did beat up the brand of the Democratic Party. It did. And that was his take on it. That right to work may have done this. And that Walker you played a huge part. I do not disagree that Scott Walker played a huge part in the change in Wisconsin. I just got to tell you, the Obama Trump voter is really the Obama Walker Trump voter. All those areas we always press about, south of Bayfield, south of Ashland, hard counties to poll. Outside of Virginia, Wisconsin, 7 even. It's just like, where Sean Duffy used to do well, but that was a 2010 gain for Republicans. Obama had won that district twice. So there's serious long-term damage done to the Democratic Party in the state of Wisconsin. Now, it's not so much where if they don't have a good midterm like they did in 18, they can't have great gains there. But if they have one bad year, if it's a down year for Democrats, they're going to get wiped out in Wisconsin. Wiped out. The Senate candidate's going to lose. The incumbent governor is going to lose. Tony Evers is in deep trouble. Deep trouble. And then, Michigan, I would still rate as leaning Democrat, or even maybe likely at this point. There's some issues in Pennsylvania. We're going to take a look at them. It was very close when we polled it, but there has been this massive effort to screw Doug Mastriano. And it's coming from your own party, Republicans, if you want to be mad at anybody. The Republican Governors Association cut him off. Nobody is helping Doug, and he can't fundraise. Can't do it all by himself. And that is a direct result of the rhinos in the party not wanting Doug Mastriano to be the governor. It has nothing to do with whether or not Doug was electable or not. Of course he was electable. He is electable. They don't want Trump's friend to be the governor of Pennsylvania when Trump runs for re-election again in 2024. You understand what I'm saying? They don't want Doug to be the governor. And Trump runs for president. They know Pennsylvania is likely going to be the linchpin. And who is the governor absolutely matters as to how the votes are counted. That is not in dispute. All right. So there we have it. I just wanted to show you there. We do have this primary vote share. It was terrible for Democrats this year, so it is what it is. Again, it is 136. I'm going to do it one more time. Implore you guys to go ahead and support the Public Polling Project. I'm going to show you this. Share it far and wide. You can just even share a big data poll if you don't have the link in front of you, although the direct link is always best. But if you just simply go to big data poll, and I'm going to add more stuff as we go. Biden's approval rating is next to go up. If you scroll down, this is some of the portfolio for big data poll. You can click on economic just to get the economic stuff. Click on political just to get the political. You can click on all to get all, which more will be added. Why is Trump and Biden not up here? The 2020 is not here. That's weird. It was right here. The map for 2020, the Public Polling Project, which was easier because you could just click on that, click on the map. Because when the map, you click on that and the map comes up, and you could just click on the different polling results by going to the state, clicking on the state. All right, so we'll add more as we do. And then right below that is where you see the wall for everything, okay? And look, we're almost 10% there already. That's not that bad. And I'm still, like I said, keeping that cost way down. We always eat some of it. Ooh, yeah, a fifth of it at least. But especially since it's a midterm, I told you the panels just don't cut it. P2P is getting more expensive since 10DLC, and it has, even though we have one of the better vendors. I kept it as at that original cost or target. It's not cost. I kept it there as low as I could, as long as I could, and just couldn't do it anymore, folks. We were losing money like crazy. I don't know about Dan Cox. I mean, you got to have it obviously right now, as a Democrat favor, but there has been some polling there that shows in Maryland, Republicans could keep that governorship, which would be incredible. And as far as can Doug win, Doug can win, but he's going to have to pick up steam here. I also am not surprised that polls are now showing Oz outpacing Doug and Mastriano because two reasons. One, if Oz consolidated his base, like I told you when I polled it, that was bound to happen. Oz was doing extremely well. In some areas in Philadelphia, probably celebrity. It's also, he knows the area well and he's got connections to it. And then the other part of that was how well Oz was doing in Allegheny County. Doug Mastriano was doing like a typical Republican, even a little bit less in Allegheny County, while he was running it up in some Trumpy areas in the conservative parts of Pennsylvania, but also in the Northeast. Oz was doing really well in the Trumpy areas in the Northeast. He was doing, low to mid 40s in Allegheny, which is a strong performance for a Republican. Trump did it in 2016. And he fell about 2 points in 2020, which hurt. That spread matters. So if Oz consolidated the Mastriano-Trump base, Republican traditionalists, and then had still that much more appeal among certain independent voters, even some Democrats, then Oz was going to outpace Mastriano. That was going to happen, unless Mastriano did as well as Oz in Philadelphia and Allegheny, which I just never saw happening. Some of it's just celebrity. And the second reason is Mastriano's voters are going to be much more likely to say they're undecided or not want to participate at all. Okay? I'm talking about with polls. That is absolutely going to happen. And it's something that's going to reflect in the polls whether it's fair or not to Doug. All right. Some of the other ones, like I said, I think Kerry Lake is the favorite to win. I don't care. Look, I'm very disappointed in a certain pollster who came out with this, like, Blake Masters is down by 10, Hobbs is up by 1. I know for a fact that the Master campaign had just used him, and he showed a very different race. It makes me uncomfortable to see people's results differ based on who's paying bills. Very disappointing. Oh, and to answer someone else about Seltzer, what happened in 2020 that disappointed me, I wasn't just talking about the big, she's just amassing this record of big swings between September to the end of October, which I don't believe. I believe those are artifacts of the polls themselves. Yes, polls change, but they don't swing, folks, 10, 15 points in a month. That doesn't happen. That is an artifact of your poll or a change in your likely voter model, something. All right. But there was something else that happened. And that was, if you don't remember, before the Iowa caucuses, the Des Moines Register poll, which is Seltzer, she is the best at Iowa caucuses and has been for a while. All right. She's allowed CNN and the Des Moines Register to bully her into spiking a poll the day before the Iowa caucuses. From what I understand, there were two reasons. Public is private. The public reason was that the Buttigieg campaign had seen an error from one interviewer in the live caller mode that had missed asking, and they said it was them, but it wasn't them because candidates are rotated. So it could have been that they cut off Bernie Sanders in one question. They cut off Pete Buttigieg in the next answer. But it only impacted a very few number of interviews. And pollsters like a wide range, folks, criticized this. From Patrick Murray at Monmouth to myself and others. There were a lot of them, but I'm saying you don't get much more on the spectrum than that. You can rectify that issue very easily. I think it was like 10 or 20 interviews. It was not a lot. Those interviews are discarded. And it wasn't that they were cut off. It was the screen viewport apparently had cut somebody off at and then the interviewer may or may not have not included everyone. They weren't even sure it happened, but the possibility it happened was there. That's nothing. You discard those interviews and you keep going and you collect the sample size that you had to discard. Or you collect the number of interviews that you had to discard to make sure your sample size is adequate. You don't junk an entire poll based on the complaints of two candidates because that was the public complaint that was lodged to CNN and Des Moines Register. That was from the Buttigieg campaign. The other complaint was from the Biden campaign and Barack Obama. Oh, yes. And they were mad that Joe Biden was in fourth place. The race was fairly close. Bernie Sanders was in the lead. Buttigieg was a little bit behind. Bernie Sanders was in fourth. That actually panned out to be one of the more accurate polls. If you remember, go look right now, you'll see the Iowa caucus polling for the Democratic nomination had Joe Biden winning that nomination, winning that caucus. But Ann had him in fourth. That's what happened. Pete Buttigieg declared victory, even though, if you remember, there was a mess up with the application. They couldn't even count the votes. Ugh, it's pathetic. Or at least that was the stated excuse. We gave it to the Sanders campaign. There are rules. It is not like a normal primary. There are caucuses. People meet. They're persuading the people that are there. The caucus captains tally up votes after that's done, or caucus votes that are done, and then those are put in the state delegate equivalents, SDEs, which are later assigned state delegates, right? Or state delegate equivalents are assigned from the number of votes, and then that tallies up the share for the caucus. It's crazy, I know. Allocated tons of SDEs incorrectly and screwed Bernie Sanders. The very first one that I looked at after receiving an allocation showed Pete Buttigieg was allocated the SDEs when Bernie Sanders won the caucus in that area. They were not alone. It was everywhere. And so afterwards, most of it, not all of it, but some of it got rectified, and we now know that Bernie Sanders won the Iowa caucus. But at the time, the entire charade was to deflate Bernie going into New Hampshire because everybody expected Bernie to win in New Hampshire. What happened? Buttigieg declared victory. Joe Biden was ass kicked in New Hampshire, and Bernie Sanders won it, but he won it by a smaller margin than the poll suggested because a lot of people thought he had lost the Iowa caucus and stayed home. They manipulated the Democratic voters. And it was all just to use Pete as a total tool until they could pivot to South Carolina and Barack Obama could start threatening people. That's what happened. If Barack Obama did not get involved, Joe Biden would not have been the nominee. If they didn't fudge Iowa, they would not have been the nominee because Bernie would have picked up the usual momentum from winning primaries and caucuses. That's what happens. But they blunted that momentum. They successfully manipulated the Democratic voter, which they cannot do to the Republican vote. That was the biggest question for me in 2020 was, will Democrats, because I'm polling them, everybody else was, but we saw what we saw, which is that their heart was with Bernie Sanders, but they were being told Bernie could not win. Could the Democratic voter be successfully manipulated like Republicans had been for many years by Fox News? Could the media do it? Or will Democrats declare their independence like Republicans did in 2016 and nominate who they wanted to nominate? Unfortunately for Democrats, they proved hive-minded and they were easily manipulated, and they got somebody who didn't represent their values. I was cheering for them. I was. Not because I like Bernie Sanders. I call him Bend Over Bernie. He's the biggest pushover ever. He knows what they did to him in Iowa, and he didn't do anything. Very sad. But I was rooting for the Democratic voter to have the courage and the strength to stand by their principles, because that's the way a strong, self-governing society should be. MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all these filthy outlets should not be able to pick a party's nominee, just like Fox News should not have been able or have the power to pick the Republican nominee. I was proud of the Republican voter when they nominated the person that they very clearly wanted to nominate in 2016. They didn't fall for it again, like they fell for it for Mitt Romney, like they fell for it for John McCain. By the way, like they fell for George W. Bush. The media picked George W. Bush. Fox News picked him. John McCain was thought of as the next runner-up. He was more liked. I didn't vote for him. But I didn't vote for him I don't, actually. I do think Cox could be a sleeper. I brought that up before. I guess you might have missed it, but I just saw that in the corner of my eye. I do think that if it's a good Republican year, Cox could sleep. Be a sleeper there. Maryland is used to having a Republican governor at this point, and I have actually seen polling that was not at all bad for Cox. Not at all. You may notice since that poll was released, there's been basically a blackout on polling in Maryland. I wonder why. I thought Larry Hogan hates the guy. He can't win. Yeah, right. If it's a good Republican year, they could win some governorships in states like that. Absolutely. It's a history, long history of those blue eastern states electing Republican governors. Connecticut, Bob Stefanowski is running a crappy campaign. Crappy. All right. So with that in mind, it is 1:50. I went over about 5 minutes when I was supposed to get out of here. All right. But I am. She's yelling at me. She's right. All right. So with that in mind, don't forget, share the Public Polling Project Forum. Why? We'll be back on Friday with hopefully that governor's map, in fact. All right. And we'll talk more about some other ones that we possibly could do if we can fund them. I really don't want to have to be forced to poll Ohio. I will be so mad if these dishonest idiots make me poll this race, and I'll be even madder if it's like a Vance plus 6 or 8 or something.
Oh, that's just
because I know it's like I know it, Laura. I think back to our original conversation. No, Ohio is not competitive. No, and now here we are. But I thought on that state they'd come around this year. I really did, Laura. I really did. I thought they're not going to make fools of themselves again.
Who's naive now, Kate?
Amen to that. All right. With that in mind, don't forget peoplespundit.locals.com, and we will be back on Friday with Free Will and Friday. Mo and Mo. All right. Deuces, folks. Deuces.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but you don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette.